Well, good morning, good afternoon, or maybe it's even good evening for you. My name is Jordan, and you are listening to another episode of Jordan's Famous Friends. Today on the episode, I have the honor and the privilege to sit down with Charles Stone. I'm going to let Charles say a little bit about him in just a few minutes, but he is a friend of a friend of a friend. So he is a friend of Mac Lake. He is a friend of Jason Smith, and I'm sure you have heard those individuals on previous episodes of the podcast. If not, go ahead and go back and take a listen to those episodes, and you'll hear about a few of them as well as how we are connected. But Charles, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be with you, Jordan.
Hey, so I was gonna give kind of some of your achievements, but I feel like you should just, speak for yourself because you're a surgeon in the brain world. Is that correct?
Not a surgeon, but a well-versed. I've got some degrees in neuroscience, so I don't cut on people. I just incorporate my coaching and my teaching and training in neuroscience in all of those.
Yeah. So, brain surgeon doesn't always necessarily mean that you're cutting into somebody's head. Sometimes, you can sculpt from the outside too, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
Hey, well, we ask everybody on our show to kind of give us the Cliff Notes version of how you got to this point in your life. So take us back. You can go all the way back to birth if you want.
Sure.
And share with us how you got to the point that you're at right now in your life. We're looking at some pivotal moments or decisions that shaped your journey.
You bet. Well, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, lived there many years, went to school there, went to high school there, went to Georgia Tech. I'm a big football fan, ACC fan, go Jackets. And from there, I thought I was going to go into marine biology. I thought, I love the ocean, and then I realized there were 4 jobs per year available. So I switched and I thought, I'm going to go to law school, go to Tech's nemesis, University of Georgia. I took the LSAT, all that. Then one night in my fraternity house room, it was a Christian fraternity. I know that's an oxymoron, but it really was. I felt the hand of God on me speaking to my heart. An audible voice said he wanted me in full-time ministry, which was a totally different direction. Went to seminary at Southwestern in Fort Worth, and I met my wife in the canned green bean aisle at Buddy's Winn-Dixie grocery store. Didn't know she was going to be my wife. But oh man, this cute gal. And so I chased her for 2 years and she finally acquiesced. And best thing ever happened to me outside of my salvation when I was 16, 17. And then she was in seminary as well. Fast forwarding, we have 3 adult kids. My daughter lives in California. She's a nurse. My son is a pastor in Cleveland. And my daughter, youngest daughter, she is in Canada, London, Ontario. We served there 10 years before I came back here. So I've been in ministry 40 plus years. I'm a geek, got some degrees, written some books. If I could say that I had a hobby, it would be learning. I just love to learn, especially about the brain, how the brain works and affects us and all that sort of thing. I love popcorn. I love pizza. And really try to take care of myself. I swim a lot. I do weight exercise and trying to keep an older body as less old as I can. So that's but one pivotal situation was when our youngest daughter was in age 1. She was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Horrible finding. Well, we wrestled with that for decades. She had 10 brain surgeries. Ben Carson performed 2 of those surgeries, a well-known surgeon, Christian surgeon, ran for president a few years ago.
Yeah.
But she's doing pretty well now, but that was a very profound thing that shaped my life. And it really, as painful as it was, it really developed our walk with him. So that's the quick version of it.
So how many years have you been married?
We have been married 44 years.
Wow. How many were happy?
Well, I think most of them were happy. There were those times where they weren't so happy. You have family issues and my own issues trying to grow up and pastor a church, but most of them, we love each other and we're having the best time of our lives right now.
Man, that's fantastic. There's so many times when I ask that first opening question that I just want to keep going. I want to dive into that, but it's just, it's hard to not to. Looking at you saying, I'm I love to learn. I'm a lifelong learner. That's what we're looking for in regards to leadership for sure. We know that books often have a profound impact on our lives.
Oh
So,
yeah.
throughout all those years and all those seasons that you found yourself in, what were the books or the authors that influenced you, played a role in shaping your perspective?
Yeah. Most recently, Cal Newport. He's a really smart guy, and he wrote the book Deep Work. Written some other books as well, and he's had a profound impact on me. His writings, his most recent one, I don't recall the name. I can pull up if you want me to. But he says there are the three tenets uh, of being effective: work on quality, go slower, go to natural pace, and do what you like to do.
Hmm.
And so Cal Newport has profoundly impacted me. I'm a believer. Jalzwan Sanders, his book on leadership, I read half a dozen times. That's probably done more to help me develop my character, leadership character, than any other book. So those are two books, two authors.
Yeah, for sure. So moving past books, we look into purchases, and
Yep.
purchases can be interesting because when we look at purchases and investments, they make an impact, but we're talking specifically about product or service or experience. So it can be in each one of those categories if you want, or it can encompass all of those things. What's a significant purchase that you have
Mm-hmm.
made recently? That's had that impact?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to my mind when I reviewed these questions you sent me was our current house. When we moved to Mississippi, we wanted to downsize. I wanted to have one floor, and we just couldn't find that. And we found one. It had some work had to be done, and there were termites and all that kind of stuff. But where we live now, um, it's a smaller house, 3-bedroom house. Nothing really fancy about it. Backyard has a forest behind it. We don't even hear cars driving by. We planted a bunch of flowers, and our fun thing now is I put some hummingbird feeders out. We got these hummingbirds. I mean, it's like bees. I mean, I can stand right next to the bird feeder. It's like they just look at me and flying. So I think purchasing this house was probably one of the best things we did. Smaller house and just the location and where we are. So yeah, that was a big one.
I saw a thing earlier today, which is funny that you say that about when you get older, you watch birds like young people watch UFC fights. You just get really, really excited
Yes,
about it.
yeah, that is true. We talked about that a couple of days ago.
There's just like that you run inside, like, did you see what just happened? Like,
Yes, yes, yes.
oh, that's too funny.
Oh man.
So we have heard kind of that little Cliff Note version. I'm sure there wasn't always successes in your life. I'm sure there were
Right.
failures, and failure is often a stepping stone to success.
Mhm.
Tell us about a time or two when you faced a failure or a setback, and how, first of all, you overcame it, if you did, and what you learned from that experience that shaped you.
Yeah. When we moved to Atlanta in 1986, back to Atlanta, I felt led to leave a pretty large church. I was an associate pastor there to start a church. This was in Rick Warren's heyday, a purpose-driven church, and I was going to be the next Rick Warren in Atlanta. Rented a facility, a dance studio, put up all these chairs up, and within 6 months, we were so successful. I had worked that number down to 17 attending.
Wow.
And I remember that Sunday was July 4th weekend. I brought the message. I led the music. There were like 11 or 12 in the audience, and there were the like 5 or 6 kids in the worker back in the kids area. And I remember after that service, I went home, went upstairs in our little rental house, put the toilet top down, sat on the top of the toilet, got a towel, and just wept and wept and wept. I did not know this thing was going to work.
Hmm.
Well, we persevered. I didn't quit. That's the biggest lesson. Don't quit. And God developed a good, healthy church. It was not going to be record breaking, but I think that was probably I needed that breaking. I was full of pride, next Rick Warren, but that was really the big one. And my lesson is just don't quit. You just
Hmm.
keep going. You just persist.
Do you feel like
Persevere.
your trajectory would have changed significantly if it would have succeeded?
I think so because I don't know if I could have handled success. Now, some of the later churches grew, and I was better able to deal with growing numbers. But I think without that, I would have probably, unfortunately, probably faltered like some of the big name guys have. I don't
Hmm.
hopefully wouldn't have been morally, but may have been just mentally or emotionally. I can't take this anymore. So yeah.
Do you feel, to go back to the first question and kind of partner it with what I just asked you, do you feel any sort of responsibility for what happened to your daughter when she was going through all those things? I mean, I know that's not true, right? Like sometimes parents,
Mhm.
we do that though, but did you feel like that was a failure or was it just more of a
Yeah.
setback?
Well, actually, did not feel that Tiffany was a failure. However, our oldest daughter, during that time of the Tiffany, we, kind of neglected Heather. Didn't mean to because we were traveling around the country to find treatment for Tiffany. Heather became what I call a hellion. She was the perfect church kid, became a hellion, and we wrestled with her for years. And sent her to
Mm,
Brad camps, all kinds of things. So that was the failure. And it was a failure because I didn't know what else to do. I only had so much bandwidth to keep my daughter alive. Like, Heather, you're the oldest. Kind of take care of yourself. Now we took care of her, but my distance to her. We actually wrote a book together about this later on. We realized some lessons we learned from that, but that was the failure. That just the stress affected her. It came out on her more than anything.
yeah. It's interesting how now looking back at that, you constantly contemplate, could we have done something different? Should we have done something
Yes,
different? Things
yes,
like
yeah,
that. Yeah. I should probably ask people's spouses this question because sometimes our guests know, sometimes our guests have to scramble a little bit for it. But looking at all the things that you have said throughout your life, usually you land on one thing, right? Like usually it comes back to I'm saying the same thing over and over again. So, what is your go-to message to the world? If you impart your wisdom and experiences into one
yeah,
message, what would that
yeah.
be?
Well, obviously, place your life in Christ's hands. Give your life to Christ. Aside from that, I would say keep yourself emotionally and mentally healthy.
Hmm.
Whether that means getting a coach, getting a counselor, making it a priority to keep your soul healthy. That's my message. Aside from give your heart to Christ, after you do that, keep yourself healthy spiritually, emotionally, and mentally.
Charles, what would you say the difference is between a mentor or a counselor and a coach?
Yeah, a counselor mostly deals with looking back, problems, issues. A coach helps. When I do my coaching, I'm helping my clients, and mostly pastors. How do you look forward? What do you want to accomplish now in your life in the future? And I help facilitate that process of self discovery where they can find solutions. And what I tell them, because I've been a pastor, I said, okay, I'm putting on my pastor hat right now. And I tell them my experience. So it's not just this pure non directive thing at all. So that's the difference. It's more of a past look, counselor, forward look, coach.
Hmm. How could somebody evaluate which one of those they need? I think everybody needs both, right? Like I
Yeah,
think you
yeah,
could
yeah.
you could definitely like make a hard case for that, but
Sure.
how do you help somebody kind of understand that?
Yeah. Well, there's certainly a crossover. I'm trained as a coach. I'm not psychologically trained. So I think that if someone is really struggling with issues, probably a counselor.
Hmm.
Someone's really, with personal issues, someone's really struggling with, okay, how do I move forward? I'm kind of in a rut. Where do I need to go in my ministry or my life? I think a coach probably might be the best first choice. But like you said, sometimes it's both. You need
Yeah.
both. I've had both, in my life. So.
Yeah, for sure. And it almost feels like maybe you don't have the same experience, but it almost feels like coaches are harder to find than counselors.
Well, coaching is really a growing, if you say it, business now.
Yeah.
There probably are more counselors, but it's a really growing business because to get your certification in counseling, you've got to have like thousands of hours. It's less hours to get a certification in coaching, depending on the level that you're at. So,
Yeah. With all the shoulders that you've rubbed these past couple of years and the books that you've read and the places that you have participated in, are there any quotes or mottos that resonate deeply with you that you find yourself kind of going back to? And just full transparency, majority of people, so don't feel bad, butcher quotes on this podcast.
yes. Well, one of my life verses is Isaiah 32:8. It says, "The noble man makes noble plans, and by noble deeds he stands." And so, if that's one thing I want to be remembered for, and a quote from Scripture, and a quote that just a great quote, that's it. Isaiah 32:8. No man makes noble plans, and by noble deeds he stands.
You have any secular quotes?
I think I would go back to Cal Newport. Those three, although I can't give you his quote because his whole book was around these three: go slow, do what you like to do, focus on quality. That concept, and I'm sure he probably has a real succinct quote better than what I just said it, but that's very powerful, especially in this stage of my life. And I realized, I wish I'd done that 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I wish I'd done that. Okay, you don't have to drive yourself into the ground.
How do you eliminate the "I wish I would have" in your life? What does that look like? Like how do you
Mhm.
not dwell in that past space?
I think two things. It's just a function of wisdom. The more experiences in life, and if you've been a learner, you don't live in regrets. I think that's a big one. I think secondly is it's a kind of fancy term, metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about your thinking. Have the discipline to be able to be aware in a point in time. Okay, what am I thinking about? Am I wallowing in regret? Okay, I need to switch channels. So it's developing that ability to catch yourself before you move into regret, and before that regret really engages your emotional systems, your brain's emotional systems, and really blows everything out of proportion. Where your self-talk and the narrative you're describing, it becomes the problem rather than just the initial regret or the issue that caused that thought of regret.
How long does it take for somebody to get that discipline down?
Well, it's taken me years. I wrote a book on biblical mindfulness, and when I heard the phrase, the term, I thought, "Oh yes, that is really something I've got to do," because my tendency, my struggle in life has been kind of anxiety, so I tend to like ruminate over the past. And it's just a matter of building in the discipline to do it. Every morning in my devotional time, I practice biblical mindfulness, and that helps me really stay centered and focused and making me aware. And then just the more you do it, the more you're able to stay in the moment rather than worrying about the future or regrets about the past. So it's practice. Uh, First of all, knowing about it, and then practice. The more you practice, the more it becomes kind of second nature.
Is there a rewiring that needs to take place?
Well, that's what happens. There is
Yeah.
rewiring. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what you're actually doing. That's what the brain does. These synapses, these are gaps between the neurons, the brain's main cell. And you have to, if you can imagine a big cable, these big cables that have a whole bunch of wires. If you not screw twist several of those together, those are strong circuits. And if there's around negative thinking or incorrect thinking, you've got to be aware of those and unravel those and develop new circuits. And although that little circuit's still there, that negative thinking circuit is still there, it's not as powerful as these new circuits you developed.
Do people backtrack? I know I'm kind of asking you questions off of questions, but do you find that people backtrack a little bit on that? Like when they, they, I don't want to say, I don't have a better word for it. It's kind of just out of my mind. Like in the church world, we would call this backsliding, but it's not backsliding.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when we are low, when we're stressed, we don't know how to handle stress. I've got a book coming out on stress, and that's another big learning for me, how to manage our stress. When we are stressed, what actually happens is the front part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is where your high level happens, the planning and thinking, emotional control, basically turns down, almost shuts off, and your emotional centers, called the limbic system, takes over. So yeah, when you're really emotional, when you don't have the skills to be able to manage your stress and be more resilient, yes, you'll backtrack, you'll fall back. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people give up in that moment, right? Because they're like, oh, I just can't break this, and it's a push to constantly move forward, And going off of what you said from Isaiah, like noble things take time to cement in your mind, which
Yes.
is big. Moving forward a little bit, you talked about your investment of your house. When we talk about investments like time and energy, what's a worthwhile investment that you've made or that has a significant impact that's kind of beyond that house?
Yeah. Well, this is not recent, but one of my degrees is an executive master's in the neuroscience of leadership. I got this several years ago. That really began my journey and fascination with how the brain works and integrating that with biblical truth. So that was a huge springboard for me to get some other training and education in that area. I got my Ph.D. in practical theology, but I focused on stress among pastors and the neuroscience behind all that. So way back, that was a worthwhile investment getting that degree. And it all began when I read a book by David Rock called Your Brain at Work. That was what was the initial spark, and then led me to that education and further education.
Your brain at work. Give us like the 2-sentence summary of that.
Your Brain at Work is an easy to understand book on how your brain works.
Hey, that's easy enough.
A good title will do that for you.
I'll put the link in the description. People can go check it out. Absolutely. All right, so you have a significant serious side, but we all have quirks and guilty pleasures. What's an unusual habit or an absolutely absurd thing that you love and brings you joy?
I love to pester my wife. I pester and I keep pestering. She said, "Now stop." Well, that doesn't mean I have to stop. I just keep pestering. She said, "Stop." And then there's this tone in her voice that says, "Really stop." And at that point, I stop, and then I just start dying laughing. So that's, I guess, a quirk. She would not say it's a happy quirk, but I love it.
There is
Making
nothing in the
unusual
Bible that says
noises.
your wife. It says, do not provoke your children to anger. It
That's
does not
it.
say your
That's
wife.
it. That's it. I mean, it's funny looks. I like walk like an old guy, pull up my pants up to my chest, or we'd be driving. I would make him cow noises. Stop. I'll make a few more. Stop. A few more. Then at the end, and then I just mouth it. She says, "I know you're mouthing it." So
That's amazing. Hey, that's what keeps the it keeps love fresh, right?
it
Like,
does. Oh yeah, we are
yeah.
having so much fun. We playfulness is one of the, I think, indicators of strong, healthy marriage. Where you can play, not cutting the other person down, not that. But,
People forget how to laugh too, which is so key to life.
yeah.
Anything else? Anything else that you love that's absurd or unusual?
Oh, well, it is absurd, and unusual. I think I mentioned I'm working on a book on sleep, and one of my degrees is in sleep. And I am a real geek at night. People think you are really crazy. I have an Aura ring, which measures my sleep. I have my Apple Watch. I have a device I put on my head that supposedly kind of gets your brain waves ready for sleep. I have another device I have on my wrist that uses the principle of touch that's supposed to help you sleep. Also have a CPAP machine. I'll also have a mask I wear at night. And now I'm doing mouth taping so that I just breathe through my nose.
Have
So
you found
that's
success
weird.
with mouth taping?
I have, yeah.
Of
And
all
the
those,
reason,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
the reason I originally got this stuff that, like, oh my God, ripped your skin off, but now I just have this paper and medical tape that I put on it. And the reason I do that is because I have apnea. Uh, I just use a little pillow. It's called a pillow device, and it's just around your nose. If you start breathing through your mouth, you're basically, CPAP's not working. So that's what I do when I do my mouth taping. Now, I'm not recommending it. Talk to your doctor, but it really works for me since I have a CPAP machine.
Of all those things that you just brought up, what would be like the number one? Like if somebody was like, "Hey, I want to try something for better sleep," because I know you're a sleep coach, right? And
Yep.
what's like the number one that you recommend?
Let's see. I would say the number one would be put down your electronics, uh, turn down the lights at night. These are things outside of the gadgets I use. Make your room cool and dark. Those are simple, easy things to do rather than have to buy a device.
Do you have the chili pad the thing that cools your bed?
I don't have that. I don't think I need it. We just had in our house in Mississippi, it gets hot on one end because the air conditioner is on the other end. So we had a little small unit put in there. So now we're able to bring it down in the mid 60s, and my wife has an extra blanket, and so that keeps it cool enough.
What's the when you look at the hours of sleep, like what's the pocket number? You think it's dependent on the person, or is it?
Well, it is dependent on the person, but in general, the experts say 7 to 9 varies. More than 9 is not good for you. Less than 7 is good for you.
Mm,
For me, I'm not a great sleeper, so I try to give myself 8.5 hours of opportunity because I have to get up, go to the bathroom or just kind of I'm a light sleeper. That gives me usually around 7.5 because you don't sleep unless one of these rare people that sleeps all through the night, and I'm jealous for those that do. Give yourself an opportunity probably for that 8ish, so you at least get 7, unless you have some real the sleep issue.
I love that you just said the opportunity. Like
Yeah.
that is a really interesting way of looking at sleep because normally we just are like the time I'm laying in bed to the time I get up. We
Right.
we just think like that's our sleep, but I've noticed because I use I monitor my sleep as well, but I've noticed like even if I'm laying down and I'm breathing normal, oftentimes my body will think I'm sleeping. It doesn't think that I'm sleeping deep by any means,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still laying there, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
word, which is
Yeah, all the stages of sleep, even that pre to stage 1 and stage 1 are important. There's something called sleep efficiency. The reason I say the opportunity for sleep, a sleep efficiency is how much sleep you actually get over how much sleep time you're in bed.
mm-hmm,
And the experts say you want to have your sleep efficiency anywhere from 85 to 90%. If it's 100%, that means you are exhausted. You've overexhausted yourself because we do wake up some. So that's the key. Now for me, because I kind of move a lot when I sleep, the Oura Ring and my Apple Watch don't really give me the true accurate figure. So I have to weigh that. Okay, you just didn't really. I was not awake for 2 hours. I
yeah,
know that.
yeah. Change is constant. Growth comes from adopting new beliefs, behaviors, habits. Obviously, you have a lot of them, which I love. Share with us something new that you've incorporated
Yeah.
into your life recently that has had a positive impact.
It's a podcaster named Andrew Huberman, who is kind of the neuroscientist today, very popular. His personal life does not it's not really that great, so you have to kind of realize that. But brilliant, he brings in these great guests. Matthew Walker wrote the book "Why We Sleep," the best book on why we sleep, I believe, and he also brought in a woman, Gabrielle Lyons. She's an expert in muscles. And she says the old recommended daily recommendation by the government, whoever recommends how much food we get in protein, is woefully inadequate. It's 30 years old. She says you need to get protein, especially for older people, 1 gram of protein per 1 pound weight. And so I realized, man, because I don't eat a whole lot of red meat, I eat vegetables and fruits and chicken. Then I realized, I do not get enough protein.
Hmm.
So I'm using protein powder. I do protein shakes 3 times a day. I do the protein shakes. Maximizing my protein, that 1 gram per pound, and that's been a big difference. And I'm also what's a creatine because when you get older, you lose muscle mass. So I've started adding creatine in. I'm beginning to see it now, but you have to also do weight training.
Right.
You want to push against those muscles. So that has been a big, big learning that I think is going to forever change my life, just getting more protein, especially for like seniors. I'm 69. I don't call myself a senior, but I want to live a long time. And my dad's 93 and he's still putzing around and doing good. So I want to do that.
Creatine got a super bad rap long time ago when like it
Yeah.
first came out because it was not good for you. Like they wanted you to cycle it and all that other stuff. And now creatine is it's in my cabinet. It's in a lot of guys
Yeah.
that I know
Oh, yeah.
workouts cabinet. And you're right, you have to partner that with exercise because you can't just it's not a
Yeah.
magic pill or anything like that. But it's
No, no,
interesting to hear
no.
somebody your age talk about creatine because you don't hear it a whole lot.
Yeah. I'm not the guy on the weight. I do a dumbbell exercise 3 days a week, video, and I swim 5 days a week and do stretches a couple of times a week. So, I really want to maximize that health and maximize that system of muscles, which is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the other kind of misconception is if I do that, I'm going to get big. People are like, oh, I don't want to
No,
be big and bulky. I'm like,
no,
well, let's talk
no,
about that when you get there, because I don't think you're going to get there.
no.
I mean,
Right.
I don't want to be like like popping a balloon here, but
Yeah.
I think that's often a justification for people not even trying. And deep down, maybe there would be something in there that they're like, I do want to be in shape and physically fit, but
Yeah.
they know it takes pain and hard work and determination to get there too.
Absolutely. Yep.
Given your experiences and insights, what advice would you give to someone navigating the challenges of the real world today?
Yeah. Well, I think by almost all measures, uh, world, morals, health, relationships are going down. We're not a healthy spiritually emotional world. The political rancor, the uh, just pretty much everything. So, and when I'm having to remind myself when I read the news, I'm kind of a news junkie, probably overly so. I have to remind myself, God is in control. He really is a sovereign God. We can trust Him because the brain does not like uncertainty. When we're facing uncertainty, it engages our limbic system. We don't sleep as well, increases stress, increases cortisol, bad for us. So we need to uh, place our confidence in what is certain, and that's the God of the Bible. Jesus, He is our rock. So I would say that's it. In this crazy world, this mixed up world, all these problems, place your faith in who is certain, the God of the universe, the God of the Holy Bible. So that's what I'd say.
How do you get
Answer that
somebody
one.
there that's not a believer?
Well, there's all kinds of evangelism programs. We're going to be teaching something called Three Circles that guy in Florida developed. And so it's basically like praying in the morning, like, Lord, open up opportunities. And what I do is I do what's called raising the flag. There was a guy named, what was his name? Seminary Billy, somebody. Anyway, he says when you're in a relationship with somebody you don't know or even know, raise the flag. Like when I'm talking to somebody and we're talking about dogs, like, isn't God just so creative? How he made all these different dogs. And if someone says, you're like, no comment. I know I probably can't go there. And yet, we were on vacation, and this guy's name, he was a mathematician, Ph.D. in math, Buddhist. And he said, I think all religions are the same. I thought, well, that's an entree. He said, well, actually, Christianity has some distinctions. And I shared some of the distinctions and was able to weave the gospel into that. So it's looking for opportunities, not being pushy, but really being open. Raise the flag. Sometimes like, nah, they're not interested. It'll just turn them off. I got a guy that does some work for us around the house, and he is dealing with cancer. And I saw him a couple days ago. Said, "Hey man, how's it going?" I said, "Well, I don't have the reports back yet." So, man, let me know so I know how I can pray for you. I prayed for him once. So I'm just building these kind of spiritual conversations, and I'm gonna have this little band, the Three Circles band, I wear around my wrist.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share the gospel with him.
Yeah.
But I'm building that rapport, and he's seeing that I'm a good guy. I'm not a scary weirdo.
Yeah. It can be really hard to have a jumping off point, because then it feels like the older I get, the more the gospel becomes a sales pitch instead of a true,
Yeah.
genuine, like, hey man, like this is good. This is something that
Yeah.
is much
Yeah.
needed in your life. And it's not just
Yes.
something we just sell people so they can put it
Yeah.
on their shelf. This is
Yeah.
life transforming stuff,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
hard. But
Mm-hmm.
on the flip side of that, what are some common advice or beliefs that you think people should ignore?
What advice should people ignore? Probably that stuff of the world is really going to satisfy you. It
Mm-hmm.
does temporarily. I mean, like, it's got dopamine flowing in, it's serotonin when we experience some of these things, but all those things wear off and we lose that sense of feel good. And the message in all of our commercials, all of marketing is you need this to be a better person to feel better.
Hmm.
So I would say just be careful about that. It wears off. It does. We're not. Emotions come and go.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's what I'd say to that one.
What about bad recommendations? Like, do you hear some bad recommendations in your profession that, or practices that come across and you're like, man, just don't do that?
Well, I see practices as I coach pastors. In fact, one of the things I do is I coach Ph.D. students, and got this Ph.D. student. He's a great guy, and just love him. And we just built a real rapport. He's doing some really interesting research on trauma in the African American church, and so I'm just learning a lot from him. But every time we meet, usually about once a month, say, "How are you doing taking care of yourself? Are you taking a day off?" And he kind of pauses and kind of smiles because he also has a lot of other things going as well.
Sure.
So I think that people, especially pastors, can ignore the importance of that day off. And that day off is not, well, yeah, I just reviewed my sermon. I'll make a few calls. No, it's disconnecting.
Mm-hmm.
Best you can to disconnect. We need that long term. Now we make, if you're a young whippersnapper, you maybe can go a few years. But you what, it'll take a toll. It did on me, even though I tried to take a day off. We had a Saturday service. Well, Saturday's my day off, just until 3:00. No,
Right.
that doesn't count.
So with that said, in the last 5 years, what have you become better at saying no to? I mean, that's basically your
Yeah.
advice is you're saying like say
Yeah.
no to some of this stuff. What about like, in your walk, distractions, invitations, things like that? What do you say no to?
Well, I wrote a blog post on 5 ways to say no, and I think I've developed an unhealthy way to say no instead of like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't need to be harsh. And I think sometimes we equate a no with offending somebody. But another thing that helped is there's a little brain insight. The same place in the brain where physical pain shows up is it where social pain shows up. When we say no to somebody and they give us that negative facial feedback, it actually hurts.
Mm.
So that's why pastors tend to be people pleasers. Wrote a book on people pleasing. We tend to be people pleasing.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, it's just wisdom, knowing how to say no gracefully. And then oftentimes, and as a pastor, I know it happens to you. Hey, pastor, I got to give you this. Here's this book. I want you to read this book. I say, thank you so much. I'll put it on the stack. But to be honest with you, I've got so many ahead of it. So if I get to it, I will.
Yeah.
So it's kind of setting expectations. So you're saying no without an exclamation point.
It's funny how many times I do get that. Like, have you read this? Have you read this? I'm like, I can only read so much.
Yeah. Yes.
And I can read it, but I can't retain it. There's a lot of times where people are like, well, what do you think about this guy? Or what do you think about this guy? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not in his church or I'm not in that, proximity. So you have to tell people no to that stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, what about when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused? Where do you go to regain your focus, clarity, stuff like that?
There's another big word, something called post-prandial dip. Prandial is a word for lunch. When we all kind of have that lull after lunch, certainly it's, if we've eaten a high carb meal, that affects it. But it's built into our circadian system. There actually is a little lull. And so I know that, like, for me, it's like, the 1 to 3, I'm like really not so well. What I do is I will put non-thinking things on my routine there, or because I'm not focused, or I take a nap. Less than 30 minutes. That really helps. Or even putting exercise in there. So it's being aware of, like, if I'm reading or trying to put a sermon together, like, I'm just reading this over and over again. I'm getting nowhere. So it's awareness of that, stopping it, and doing something that can add a little more energy to you. So that's awfully helpful as well.
When you sleep, and I'm glad you brought up the 30-minute thing, because we coach guys sometimes with this too as well. Like, you can take a nap in the afternoon, but don't go over 30 minutes, like, because you'll just totally ruin some stuff. Yeah. But when you find that you sleep in the afternoon, is it harder for you to fall asleep at night?
Well, there's something called adenosine. It is a neurotransmitter that builds up through the day. And it creates what's called sleep drive. When you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier in the evening. If you take longer naps, if you can imagine, adenosine is like blowing up a balloon. You want that balloon to be real full at night, because that's going to, then overnight it dissipates. If you take a nap during the day that is too long, you deplete that adenosine, so you're not going to be able to sleep as well or be as sleepy at night. So all the experts say 20 to 30 minutes, probably okay. However, if you're having trouble sleeping at night, you probably want to skip the nap,
Hmm.
exercise, or go for a walk. And you want to do it early afternoon, 12 to 2, somewhere in that time frame, not closer to bedtime. Because you want that adenosine.
Yeah, because there's some people who I've talked to, and they're like, I did that nap thing, and they're like, I only sleep for like 15 minutes. They're like, but man, I cannot get back to sleep again at night, so they just feel
Yeah,
like they're really wound up.
not for them. Yep,
Yeah, maybe
not
go
for
for a
them.
walk or, a
Yeah, yeah,
light
yeah.
run or do something, aerobic or whatever the case is.
Yes, yes.
I usually ask the last question, but I'm going to ask a second to last question, and then I'm going to ask you the last question that I ask all
Sure.
of our guests, because with your expertise and your experience, what is one thing about the brain that people don't know that you wish they knew and they never ask you about? Like when it comes to all the stuff that you've written, all the books that you have published, all the articles that you've pressed, that if you boil it down to like, man, but nobody wants to know this, but they need to know this, what would that be?
The one thing. Okay, that is a great question. Oh, let's see. What would it be? Um, I would say that chronic. It would be this, and 5 minutes later, after we get off our call, it may be something else. But
Yeah, you call me back and be like, wait,
yeah,
let's
this is
re-edit
number
this.
one. This is number one. Yeah. Chronic stress really robs you of a healthy life.
Hmm.
Now, we have situations that we can't get out of, like you have like a
Can
kid
you
that's
define that real quick,
precocious.
Charles? Like, how would you define chronic stress?
Yeah, chronic stress is stress that is unremitting. It's just on and on and on.
Hmm.
Versus acute stress is like, okay, we all have acute stress. We need that. Like we want to be a little bit uh, up when we preach.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that so that'd be acute stress in that stress event in a positive way. Chronic stress is something ongoing. We can't necessarily take away the events. Chronic child, we're a keeper. We take care of that child, or we have a physical ailment that's chronically with us. However, God has given us the ability to be resilient in that, and if we don't learn resilience skills to be able to deal with that stress, when cortisol stays at a high level, cortisol is not bad. It's called the stress hormone, but it's not bad. We need it to metabolize our food and so forth. But when it stays at a high level a long time, it affects our brain, it affects our gut, it affects our heart, all those things. So I would say, if you're under chronic stress, really, do a Google search. How can I deal with my chronic stress? Like I said, I got a book coming out in a few months. But that would be the one thing.
Hmm.
Stress, especially post COVID, it's almost put us. Everybody was stressed during that time, most everybody. But it's put us in a difficult situation where there's still heightened stress that affects our health, spiritual health, relational health. So I'd say that'd be it.
What's the remedy? Like, I know you alluded to it a little bit, but like, and I'm not looking for a quick fix, but if people have that, obviously you need a coach, you need a counselor. We talked about that stuff, but like,
Mm-hmm.
what would be your one go-to in that to say, hey, you got this chronic stress going on? How do you eliminate that? How do you avoid it?
Okay, well, let's see.
Well, maybe not
Just looking.
avoiding it. Avoiding it might be a
Yeah,
bad thing. Like,
yeah, you can't avoid it sometimes. I think one of the best tools is good sleep, but it's kind of yin yangs. Like, okay, I can't sleep well and get more stress. I'm stressed. I can't sleep well.
yeah, right.
Good sleep is important. Another one is this is a simple thing people can do is practice gratitude. Science tells
Mm,
us three good things. If you write down three good things in the morning and
amen.
three good things in the evening, it will help mitigate and lessen stress. Another one is breathing. There's a real powerful breathing is very, very powerful. Deep breathing, especially on the exhale, it engages what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calming part of our nervous system. Learning to develop deep breathing. This is not when you raise your chest up, but from your abdomen. And there's something called box breathing. There's 2 or 3 techniques. Google it, but breathing would be another one. That's in the moment. So if we have these in the moment stress points, practicing breathing can overall lower the effects of that chronic stress on our body. So those 2 or 3 things pop into mind.
On my left right now is my gratitude journal, and it is my
Mm.
go-to. I
I
mean,
just bought it. You recommended it on your website. I just got it.
oh really?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
man. The people that make it, the gratitude journal, they're secular people, and I've just modified a few little pieces to it, but for the 90% of that is, I mean, it's yours, right? You make it what it is, but man, that gratitude journal goes the distance. It's the
Looking
secret
forward to
sauce.
getting it.
Yeah, yeah. What is okay? So then the last question is because I partnered it with that one. But what's one thing that people never ask you, but you wish that they would ask?
Mm-hmm. Although I have less deliverables now than it is, as lead pastor. Ask me like, how do you do your schedule?
Mm,
How do you work your schedule?
mm-hmm.
Because time is that commodity that we all have in equal amounts. But if we don't manage it well, and approach it in a wise way, then we're going to always feel behind. We're going to feel more stressed. But, not a lot of people ask me about that. If I'm coaching somebody, it's like, let me share with you kind of how I do my week. It's changed a little bit versus lead pastor, but that'd be a question that people hardly ever ask.
Isn't it amazing how the little tweaks that you've done and that people do that are really really effective? Does it surprise you like how many people don't do that? It's we always say your no does somebody else's aha, and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's amazing how many of those little tiny no does are just absent from
Yes.
people's lives.
Yeah, yeah. Part of it is no exposure, and never been shown that or taught that. And I think part of it too is a function of teachableness. If you're
Mm,
really teachable, you're a learner. You're going to always be learning.
yeah.
Everywhere you go, learning from people and asking questions and all that sort of thing. So yeah,
Yeah. Curiosity might have killed the cat, but it didn't with the human. Like curiosity
that's
gets you
right. Oh,
really
great
far.
phrase.
Yeah. There's curiosity has got me really far in life because I just ask
Mm-hmm.
questions, and the people that don't want you to ask questions, like just ignore it. Who cares? Like
Yeah,
move
right.
on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah, so you made it. You made it through all those insights, all those experiences. Like I said, I would love to go further and do, a deeper dive on some of that stuff, but we only have so much time. And so, pleasure to have you on. Before we wrap up, anything else you want to share with our listeners? Projects you're working on, or things you would like to mention, or where people can find you at?
Sure. Best place to find me at is my website, charlesstone.com. 2 S's in there, charlesstone.com. I was able to get my URL. My name is a URL. And you can sign up to my blogs, the blog a couple times a week. You can always, stop getting the blog. I tell people that. But if they sign up, there are all kinds of goodies, free goodies they can download about leadership and other areas. So charlesstone.com, connect with me there, sign up for the blog, get free stuff.
Love it, man. Wonderful. Absolutely. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode. Jordan's Famous Friends. Charles Stone, has been fantastic to have you on. Highly recommend his books and resources. Don't forget, remember to subscribe, rate, review the podcast. If we impacted you in any way, click that share button. Go ahead, share it with family, friends, loved ones, or on social media platforms. Be in the know in regards to there's some more inspiring conversations that we have coming up with some remarkable individuals. So until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.